The entire restaurant held its breath. Dominic Caruso, the most feared mafia boss in New York, had just pushed his plate away and humiliated the shy waitress in front of everyone. He thought she was just a weak little girl. He was wrong, because when Elena lifted her head, she didn't apologize. She looked the Don straight in the eyes and corrected him. In an ancient Sicilian dialect, the secret language of the old mafia families, extinct for 50 years. Dominic Caruso slowly rose to his feet. His steel-gray eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade. "Where did you learn that?" The silence stretched like a blade pressed against Elena's throat. Every pair of eyes in the VIP mezzanine was fixed on her. The bodyguards had shifted their stances, hands hovering near concealed weapons. The other diners below had frozen mid-bite, forks suspended in the air, sensing that something dangerous was unfolding above them. Dominic Caruso stood motionless, his steel-gray eyes boring into her like he was trying to read the secrets written on her bones. "I asked you a question." His voice was quiet, deadly quiet. "Where did you learn that dialect?" Elena's mind raced at 1,000 miles per hour. 15 years. 15 years of hiding, of erasing every trace of who she was, of becoming invisible, and she had thrown it all away because of a blood orange. Think. She forced her voice to stay steady, even as her heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped animal. "My grandmother, sir." Dominic tilted his head slightly. A predator assessing prey. "Your grandmother?" he repeated flatly. "Yes, sir." Elena kept her eyes lowered, submissive, playing the role of the frightened waitress. It wasn't entirely an act. She was from a village in the mountains near Corleone. She worked for a noble family there when she was young. They taught her to speak. Properly. She paused, swallowing hard. "She raised me after my parents died. She was very particular about language, about tradition, about—" Elena gestured vaguely at the plate. "About fruit." The lie tasted like ash on her tongue. Her grandmother had never existed. The woman who had taught her the old dialect was her mother, the same mother who had screamed her name while being tortured in the room above the wine cellar, 15 years ago. Dominic said nothing. He simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. From the corner of her eye, Elena saw another man shift in his seat. He was older, perhaps in his early 50s, with silver hair and the same sharp bone structure as Dominic. Marco Caruso, Dominic's uncle and chief advisor. She recognized him from the photographs her father had kept in his study, back when photographs and studies and fathers still existed in her world. Marco was watching her with narrowed eyes, his fingers drumming slowly on the white tablecloth. He didn't believe her. She could see it in the set of his jaw, but it was the third man who made Elena's blood run cold. Vinnie Bones. He sat at the far end of the table, a hulking figure with a face like cracked leather and hands that looked capable of snapping necks. He was staring at her not with suspicion, but with something worse. Recognition. He was trying to remember something, his brow furrowed, his lips moving slightly, as if he was running through a catalog of faces in his mind. He was there that night, Elena realized with a jolt of pure terror. He was one of them. "Sit down, everyone." Dominic's command cut through the tension. He lowered himself back into his chair, his movements deliberate and controlled. But his eyes never left Elena. "The food is getting cold." He picked up his fork. "We don't waste good food in this family." The other men slowly returned to their meals, though the atmosphere remained charged, electric. Marco exchanged a glance with Dominic, a silent conversation that Elena couldn't decipher. She began to back away, desperate to disappear into the shadows of the kitchen, to become invisible again. "Wait." Dominic's voice stopped her like a physical wall. Elena turned, her tray clutched to her chest like a shield. Dominic took a slow sip of his wine, his eyes fixed on her over the rim of the glass. When he set it down, a small, dangerous smile played at the corner of his lips. "Don't go anywhere, little waitress." His voice was silk wrapped around steel. "I'm not done with you yet." Elena nodded, unable to speak. She retreated to the corner of the mezzanine, pressing her back against the wall, making herself as small as possible. Her hands were trembling so badly that the silverware on her tray rattled softly. 15 years, she thought, her chest tight with panic. 15 years of being no one. And now the lion had caught her scent. And lions, once they smelled blood, never stopped hunting. "You, wine cellar, now." Gerald's hissed command was the sweetest sound Elena had ever heard. She didn't wait to be told twice. With a murmured, "Yes, sir," she slipped away from the VIP mezzanine, her legs carrying her down the narrow service stairs as fast as they could without breaking into a run. Get away, get away, get away. The kitchen was a blur of steam and shouting chefs, but Elena didn't stop. She pushed through the heavy wooden door at the back and descended into the wine cellar. her footsteps echoing on the ancient stone steps. The air changed immediately. Cool, damp, heavy with the scent of aged oak and earth. The cellar stretched out before her like a catacomb, rows upon rows of dusty bottles sleeping in their racks, worth more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes. Elena stopped at the bottom of the stairs, pressing her hand against the cold stone wall. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Calm down, calm down. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her father had taught her when she was a little girl, back when monsters were just stories and not men in expensive suits. Just survive tonight, she told herself. Finish the shift, go home, pack a bag, disappear again. She had done it before. She could do it again. Another city, another name, another life built from nothing. The thought was exhausting. Running away so soon. Elena's eyes flew open. The voice came from the shadows near the far wall, low, smooth, and terrifying. She spun around, her back hitting the wine rack behind her. Dominic Caruso stepped into the dim circle of light cast by the single hanging bulb. He had removed his jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a hint of the tattoo that snaked up his collarbone. A gun holster made of expensive leather was strapped beneath his left arm, the handle of a pistol gleaming dully against his ribs. He looked like a fallen angel, beautiful and lethal. "Mr. Caruso." Elena's voice came out as a whisper. "I was just getting the wine can wait." He walked toward her slowly, deliberately, each step echoing in the silence. The cellar suddenly felt very small, very private, very dangerous. "I know those mountains," Dominic said, his voice soft. "I spent summers there as a boy. With my grandfather, the villagers. They speak rough, broken sentences, swallowed vowels." He stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood, tobacco, and something darker underneath. Something that smelled like power. "But you," he tilted his head, studying her face in the dim light. "You don't speak like a peasant's granddaughter. You speak like royalty, like the old families." Elena pressed harder against the wine rack, the bottles digging into her spine. "I don't know what you mean, sir. Don't lie to me." He stepped closer, 1 foot, then another, until he was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "I've killed men for smaller lies than the one you just told me upstairs." His hand came up, resting on the wine rack beside her head, caging her in. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "So I'll ask you one more time." His voice dropped to a murmur, his breath warm against her face. "Who are you really?" Elena opened her mouth to answer another lie, another desperate fabrication, but the words died in her throat. Because Dominic's eyes had moved downward, they had landed on her collar, on the thin silver chain that had slipped free during her panicked descent, on the glint of metal that was now visible just above the top button of her uniform. Dominic's expression shifted. The predatory curiosity sharpened into something harder, something colder. His hand moved from the wine rack, toward her throat, toward the ring. Dominic's fingers reached for the chain. Time slowed to a crawl. Elena could see every detail with terrible clarity. The calluses on his knuckles, the silver signet ring on his index finger, the way the dim light caught the edge of his manicured nails. In 2 seconds, he would touch the chain. In 3 seconds, he would pull it free. In 4 seconds, he would see the ring, the lion holding the rose, the crest of the Valentino bloodline. In 5 seconds, she would be dead. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. Slap. The sound echoed through the wine cellar like a gunshot. Elena's palm connected with Dominic's hand, knocking it away from her collar with a force that surprised them both. The impact stung her skin, sent vibrations running up her arm. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. They both froze. Elena stared at her own hand in horror, as if it belonged to someone else. She had just struck the most powerful mafia boss in New York. She had just slapped away the hand of a man who could have her buried in 6 different locations before sunrise. "I'm dead," she thought. "I'm already dead." Dominic looked at his hand, then at her. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. 1 second passed, 2, 3. Then, slowly, impossibly, the corner of his mouth curved upward. He smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had just discovered that his rabbit had teeth. Feisty. The word rolled off his tongue like honey laced with poison. "No waitress has ever dared to do that to me." He flexed his fingers, still smiling that cold, dangerous smile. "No one has dared to do that to me in 15 years. Elena's back pressed harder against the wine rack. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean. Don't apologize. He stepped closer again, eliminating the small distance her slap had created. I like surprises, and you, little waitress, are full of them. His hand rose again, slower this time, more deliberate. His eyes were locked on the silver chain, on the glint of metal hiding beneath her collar. Now, let's see what you're hiding, bang. The gunshot shattered the silence of the cellar. It came from above, from the restaurant, from the VIP mezzanine. A single shot, followed immediately by the explosive sound of glass breaking. Then screaming, then chaos. Bang, 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 bang. More shots, rapid fire. The ceiling above them shook with the thunder of running feet, overturning tables, bodies hitting the floor. Dominic's entire demeanor transformed in an instant. The predator toying with his prey vanished, replaced by something harder, sharper, a soldier, a general, a killer. His hand moved from Elena's collar to the gun at his side. The weapon was out of its holster before she could blink, gleaming black steel in the dim light. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice cutting through the distant screams like a blade. He grabbed her wrist, not gently, but not cruelly either, and pulled her toward the stairs. His grip was iron, inescapable. "Mr. Caruso, what's quiet?" They reached the bottom of the staircase. Above them, the chaos intensified. Elena could hear Gerald screaming, could hear the heavy boots of bodyguards, could hear something that sounded horribly like a body falling. Dominic paused at the first step, his gun raised, his body coiled like a spring ready to release. He looked back at her over his shoulder. His gray eyes were cold, focused. But there was something else there too, something that almost looked like concern. "Stay right behind me," he said, his voice low and deadly. "Do exactly what I say." Elena nodded, unable to speak. "And Elena?" Her name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. "If you run," he held her gaze, the threat crystal clear, "I will find you. No matter where you go, no matter how far you run, I will find you." Then he turned and charged up the stairs, pulling her into the chaos above. The VIP mezzanine had become a war zone. Elena emerged from the stairwell into a nightmare of shattered glass and overturned furniture. The massive window that had overlooked Manhattan's glittering skyline was gone, reduced to a jagged maw of broken shards. Cold night air rushed through the opening, carrying with it the distant wail of sirens. Blood was everywhere. It splattered across the white tablecloths like abstract art, pooled on the marble floor, smeared on the walls where bodies had fallen and scrambled for cover. "Marco! Marco!" Dominic's voice cut through the chaos. Elena saw him push through the debris toward the far corner, where two bodyguards were dragging a limp figure behind an overturned table. Marco Caruso. The older man was conscious but pale, his face twisted in pain. His left shoulder was a mess of torn fabric and blood. A bullet had caught him just below the collarbone. One of the bodyguards was pressing a napkin against the wound, the white linen turning crimson in seconds. "Sniper!" Marco gasped, grabbing Dominic's arm with his good hand. North building, 12th floor. Dominic's head snapped toward the shattered window. His eyes scanned the darkness outside, calculating angles, distances, threats. "Return fire on the north building!" he roared at his men. "Suppressing fire! Now!" Two bodyguards moved to the window, their weapons barking into the night. The sound was deafening, echoing off the walls of the mezzanine like thunder. Elena pressed herself against a marble column, her body trembling. The rational part of her brain was screaming at her to run. The kitchen exit was 20 feet away. Everyone was distracted. She could slip out, disappear into the night, become a ghost again. "Run," the voice in her head urged. "This is your chance. Run." But she didn't run. Instead, her eyes moved across the room with a focus that didn't belong to a waitress. They catalogued threats, exits, positions the way her father had trained her to do, back when she was still Elena Valentino, princess of the underworld. The bodyguards at the window. The wounded Marco. Dominic crouched behind cover, shouting orders into the chaos. Vinnie Bones near the back, gun drawn, watching the main entrance. And then she saw it. A shadow. It moved along the back wall, near the service entrance, the same door she had used to go down to the wine cellar. A figure in dark clothing, moving low and fast, staying out of the light. Elena's blood turned to ice. The shadow reached the edge of the column, just 15 feet behind where Dominic was crouched. A gloved hand rose, holding a pistol with a long, cylindrical attachment. A silencer. The sniper was a distraction. A decoy to draw attention to the window, while the real killer slipped in through the back, and Dominic couldn't see him. He was facing the window, his back completely exposed, focused on coordinating his men against a threat that was already inside the room. The assassin raised his weapon, the barrel aligned with the back of Dominic's head. Elena's heart stopped. Let him die. The thought rose unbidden from somewhere deep inside her. Cold, logical. Just, he killed your brother. He destroyed your family. He's the reason you've been running for 15 years. Let him die. The assassin's finger moved to the trigger. This is justice. This is karma. This is what he deserves. 1 second. Elena's hand gripped the edge of the column. 2 seconds. The assassin drew a breath, steadying his aim. Let him die. But another voice rose in Elena's mind. Older, softer, her father's voice, speaking words he had told her on the last night she ever saw him alive. There is no honor in a coward's kill, little one. Remember who you are. Elena had 2 seconds to decide. Let her enemy die. Or save him. Elena didn't think. 15 years of hiding, 15 years of suppressing every instinct her father had drilled into her, all of it vanished in a single heartbeat. Her body moved on its own. Get down. The scream tore from her throat as she launched herself across the room. She hit Dominic from the side like a freight train, her shoulder slamming into his ribs with enough force to send them both crashing to the floor. Poofed. The silenced bullet cut through the air exactly where Dominic's head had been a fraction of a second before. It slammed into the marble column behind them, sending chips of stone spraying across the floor. They hit the ground hard. Elena landed on top of Dominic, her body pressing against his, her face inches from his own. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, sent pain shooting through her shoulder. But she was alive, and so was he. Bang, bang. 2 shots rang out from across the room, loud, unsuppressed, final. Elena lifted her head just in time to see Vinnie Bones standing over the assassin's body, his gun still smoking. The killer lay crumpled against the wall, 2 red blooms spreading across his chest. Dead. Clear! One of the bodyguards shouted. Snipers pulled back. We're clear! The chaos began to settle. Men lowered their weapons. Someone was calling for medical assistance. The distant sirens grew louder, closer, but Elena couldn't move. She was frozen on top of Dominic Caruso, her hands pressed against his chest, her legs tangled with his. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palms. Fast, strong, alive. Because of her. Dominic stared up at her. His gray eyes were wide, not with fear, but with something else. Something she couldn't name. Confusion, suspicion, and underneath it all, a flicker of something that looked almost like wonder. Boss! A bodyguard rushed toward them. Boss, are you? I'm fine. Dominic's voice was steady, but he didn't look away from Elena. Give us a moment. The bodyguard hesitated, then retreated. Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Dominic's gaze moved slowly across her face, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then his eyes dropped lower to her arm. Blood. A shard of glass had sliced through her uniform sleeve, leaving a gash along her forearm. The wound wasn't deep, but it was bleeding freely, crimson drops falling onto Dominic's white shirt. You're hurt, he said quietly. It's nothing, but he wasn't looking at the wound anymore. He was looking at the way she had positioned herself on top of him, her knees braced on either side of his hips, her weight distributed for maximum mobility, her hands placed precisely over his vital points. It was not the posture of a frightened waitress. It was the posture of someone trained to fight, trained to protect, trained to kill. You moved before the shot, Dominic said slowly, his voice dangerously soft. You saw him before any of my men did, before I did. Elena's blood ran cold. She tried to pull away, to scramble off him, but his hand shot up and grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron. No waitress moves like that. His eyes bored into hers, searching, demanding. No waitress has reflexes like that. Elena's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. I saw him. And you saved my life. The words hung in the air between them. Dominic pulled himself up to a sitting position, his face now inches from hers. His hand was still locked around her wrist, the silver chain at her collar glinting in the dim light. You saved the life of a man you don't know, he murmured. A man you're clearly terrified of. A man you've been lying to all night. His free hand came up, gripping her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Why? Elena opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had no answer, because she didn't know why herself. Dominic rose to his feet in one fluid motion, pulling Elena up with him. His grip on her wrist hadn't loosened for a single second. Sal. His voice cut through the aftermath of chaos like a blade. Get Marco to Dr. Ferrante. Now." A broad-shouldered man in a black suit nodded and moved toward the wounded uncle, who was being helped to his feet by 2 bodyguards. Then Dominic turned to another man, tall, bald, with the cold eyes of a professional killer. "The girl comes with us. Bring the car around. We're leaving." Elena's stomach dropped. "No." The word escaped before she could stop it. "No, please. I need to go home. I have to. You're not going anywhere." She tried to pull away, to wrench her wrist free, but Dominic's grip was unbreakable. Panic surged through her veins like wildfire. "Let me go." She twisted, struggled, her survival instinct screaming at her to run. "I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything. Please." 2 bodyguards appeared on either side of her. Massive hands clamped down on her arms, lifting her nearly off her feet. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Dominic said calmly. His eyes were cold now, the brief flicker of wonder completely extinguished. "You saved my life. I'm grateful. But you're also lying to me, and I don't tolerate liars." Elena opened her mouth to scream, but a hand pressed against her back, shoving her toward the service exit. The night air hit her face like a slap, cold, sharp, unforgiving. A black SUV was waiting in the alley, its engine already running. The bodyguards pushed her inside, and she tumbled onto the leather seat, her shoulder hitting the door hard. Dominic climbed in after her, settling into the seat directly across from hers. The door slammed shut. Locks engaged with a heavy click. The SUV pulled away, tires screeching against wet asphalt. Elena pressed herself against the cold window, putting as much distance between herself and Dominic as the confined space would allow. Her heart was racing so fast, she felt dizzy. "I'm being taken to the Caruso compound." The thought sent ice through her veins. "I'm being taken to the home of the man who killed my family." The interior of the SUV was silent, except for the hum of the engine. Manhattan's lights blurred past the tinted windows, neon signs, street lamps, the distant glow of Times Square, all of it fading as they headed north, away from the city, away from safety, away from everything. Dominic watched her from across the darkness. His face was half-shadowed, his gray eyes catching the occasional flash of passing headlights. He didn't speak. He just observed, like a predator studying its prey. "Mama," the memory hit Elena without warning. Her mother's voice, screaming through the floorboards of the wine cellar, the sound of fists against flesh, the smell of smoke creeping through the cracks. "Tell us where the girl is." "I don't know. I don't know." "Please," lying Valentino whore. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back the images. Her hands were trembling in her lap, shaking so badly she couldn't control them. "You're shaking." Dominic's voice pulled her back to the present. She opened her eyes. He was still watching her, his expression unreadable. "I'm cold," she whispered. It was a lie. They both knew it. Dominic said nothing. He simply removed his jacket and tossed it onto the seat beside her. "Put it on." Elena didn't move. That wasn't a request. She reached for the jacket with trembling fingers, pulling it over her shoulders. It was warm, heavy, and smelled of sandalwood and gunpowder. It smelled like the enemy. The SUV slowed. Elena looked out the window and felt her blood turn to ice. They had turned onto a private road, lined with ancient oak trees that stretched toward the sky like skeletal fingers. At the end of the road stood a massive iron gate at least 20 feet tall, topped with spikes that gleamed under floodlights. Armed guards patrolled both sides. Beyond the gate, rising from the darkness like a fortress from a nightmare, was the Caruso estate, Elena's prison. The Caruso estate rose from the darkness like something out of a fever dream. It was a Tuscan villa transported piece by piece to the shores of Long Island, 3 stories of honey-colored stone, terracotta roofs, and arched windows that glowed with warm light. Cypress trees lined the circular driveway, their dark silhouettes standing like sentinels against the night sky. Beautiful, and absolutely terrifying. Elena counted at least 12 armed guards visible from the car patrolling the perimeter, stationed at doorways, watching from balconies. Security cameras blinked red from every corner. Floodlights illuminated the grounds with surgical precision, leaving no shadow unexplored. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress, and I'm the prisoner. The SUV crunched to a halt on the gravel driveway. Dominic stepped out first, then turned and extended his hand toward her. Elena stared at it like it was a coiled snake. "I can walk on my own. I know you can." His voice was flat. "Take my hand anyway." It wasn't a request. She placed her trembling fingers in his palm. His grip closed around them, firm, warm, inescapable, and he pulled her from the vehicle. The night air was crisp and clean, scented with pine and roses, so different from the exhaust and garbage smell of the South Bronx street where she lived. where she survived. Her tiny studio apartment flashed through her mind, the cracked walls, the leaking pipes, the cockroaches that scattered when she turned on the lights, the mattress on the floor, the single window that looked out onto a brick wall. And now this. Marble fountains, manicured gardens, wealth beyond anything she could imagine. The irony was almost unbearable. Dominic led her up the stone steps and through the massive oak doors. The interior was even more breathtaking than the exterior. Soaring ceilings painted with Renaissance-style frescoes, crystal chandeliers that scattered light like captured stars, floors of polished marble that reflected her worn waitress shoes like a cruel mirror. They walked down a long hallway lined with oil paintings and marble statues. Elena kept her eyes forward, refusing to let the opulence intimidate her. Then she saw it, a painting on the wall to her left. It depicted a Sicilian landscape, rolling hills dotted with olive trees, a crumbling stone villa in the foreground, Mount Etna smoking in the distance. The colors were warm, golden, filled with the light of a Mediterranean sunset. Elena's heart seized in her chest. She knew this painting, not this exact one, but one almost identical. It had hung in her father's study, above his desk, where he would sit and tell her stories about the old country, about the land their family had come from, about home. "Never forget where you come from, little one," he used to say. "The blood of Sicily runs in your veins. Keep moving." Dominic's voice shattered the memory, his hand pressed against the small of her back, guiding her forward. They stopped at a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. Dominic pushed them open, revealing a large sitting room decorated in shades of cream and gold. Velvet sofas, a marble fireplace, a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid on a side table, and windows with iron bars hidden behind silk curtains. A gilded cage. "You'll stay here," Dominic said, releasing her arm. "There are guards outside. Don't try to run." Elena turned to face him. "How long? Until I decide what to do with you." He held her gaze for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face for something she couldn't name. Then he turned and walked toward the door. "Get some rest," he said without looking back. "Tomorrow, we talk. And this time, you'll tell me the truth." The door closed behind him. The lock clicked into place. Elena stood alone in the beautiful room, surrounded by luxury she had never known and could never afford. She walked slowly to the window, pushing aside the silk curtain to reveal the iron bars beneath. The moon hung low over the estate, full and bright, casting silver light across the manicured gardens. 15 years ago, she had stood at another window, in another house, watching the same moon while her world burned around her. Now she was here, in the home of her enemy, trapped. Her fingers found the ring beneath her collar, pressing it against her chest. "Papa," she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking. "What do I do now?" The moon offered no answer, only silence. 3 hours later, Dominic sat in his study, staring at a screen full of lies. The room was dark except for the glow of multiple monitors and the soft flicker of the fireplace. Sally stood behind him, arms crossed, while 2 tech specialists worked at a secondary desk, their fingers flying across keyboards. "Run it again," Dominic ordered. The lead technician, a young man with thick glasses and nervous hands, shook his head. "Boss, we've run it 6 times. The result is the same." "Then explain it to me again." Sally stepped forward, tapping the main screen. A photograph of Elena appeared, taken from the restaurant's security footage. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, her uniform stained with wine and blood. "Elena Santos," Sally read from the file. "Born in Dayton, Ohio. Social Security number issued in 1998. Parents deceased in a car accident. Moved to New York 3 years ago." He swiped to the next screen. A red error banner flashed across the data. "It's all fake. Every single piece of it." Dominic leaned forward. "How fake?" "The Social Security number belongs to a girl who died in infancy, 1999, pneumonia, buried in a cemetery outside Columbus. The high school transcripts reference a school that closed in 2005. The apartment lease was signed with forged documents." Sally pulled up another screen, a map with digital pins marking Elena's known locations. "Before 3 years ago, she doesn't exist. No credit history, no medical records, no employment history, nothing. She's a ghost," the technician murmured. The word hung in the air like smoke. Dominic stared at Elena's photograph. Those amber eyes, that defiant tilt of her chin, the way she had looked at him in the wine cellar, terrified. Yes, but also proud, stubborn, familiar. "She could be an assassin," Sally said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Planted in that restaurant months ago, waiting for the right moment. The Morano family has used honeypots before. Assassins don't save their targets. The voice came from the doorway. Marco limped into the room, his left arm in a sling, his face pale but determined. A doctor followed behind him, protesting weakly, but Marco waved him away. "You should be resting," Dominic said. "I'll rest when I'm dead." Marco lowered himself into a leather chair with a grunt of pain. "The girl. You're sure she's not working for Morano? She pushed me out of the way of a bullet. If she wanted me dead, all she had to do was nothing. Unless that's exactly what they want you to think." Marco's eyes narrowed. A classic long game. Save the target's life, earn his trust, get inside his defenses, then strike when he least expects it. Dominic said nothing. He was remembering the way Elena had moved fast, precise, trained. The way she had positioned herself over him after the tackle. Her knees braced for mobility, her hands placed over his vital points. No waitress moved like that. And the dialect, that ancient Sicilian dialect that hadn't been spoken in 50 years. The language of the old families, the language of royalty. "You speak like royalty," he had told her in the wine cellar. She had denied it, but her eyes had flickered with something that looked like fear. "No, not fear. Recognition." "I'll handle this myself," Dominic said quietly. Sally frowned. "Boss, she saved my life. Whatever she is, whatever she's hiding, I owe her the chance to explain." He rose from his chair, picking up the tablet that displayed Elena's fabricated identity. Alone. Marco and Sally exchanged glances but said nothing. Dominic walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "If she lies to me again," he said without turning around, "I'll know." Then he stepped into the hallway, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor as he made his way toward the room where Elena waited. Toward the truth. The lock clicked. Elena turned from the window, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had been sitting there for hours, watching the moon trace its slow arc across the sky, trying to find a way out that didn't exist. Dominic stepped into the room. He had changed out of his blood-stained shirt, now wearing a simple black sweater that made his gray eyes look even colder. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his fingers through it, the only sign that the night's events had affected him at all. In his hand, he carried a tablet. "You haven't slept," he observed. "Neither have you." He closed the door behind him. The click of the lock echoed like a death sentence. Elena remained by the window, her back straight, her chin lifted. She had cried earlier, silent tears that she had wiped away before they could fall, but her eyes were dry now. Red-rimmed, but dry. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Dominic walked to the coffee table and set the tablet down. With one tap, the screen illuminated, displaying her photograph and a wall of text marked with red error flags. "Elena Santos," he read aloud. "Born in Dayton, Ohio. Parents deceased. Moved to New York 3 years ago." He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "Except none of that is true, is it?" Elena said nothing. "Your social security number belongs to a dead child. Your school records are fabricated. Your entire existence before 3 years ago is a blank page." He stepped closer. "You don't exist. You're a ghost." Still, she remained silent. Dominic stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his irises, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. "So tell me, ghost." His voice dropped to a murmur. "What do you want? Why are you here?" Elena's throat tightened. "I told you. I'm just a waitress. Don't." The single word cut through the air like a blade. Dominic moved closer still, lowering himself onto the arm of a nearby chair so that their eyes were level. His gaze was intense, penetrating, stripping away every layer of defense she had built over 15 years. "I could torture the truth out of you," he said calmly. "I have men who are very good at extracting information. They could break you in hours." Elena's blood turned to ice. "But I don't like hurting women." He tilted his head, studying her face. "It's distasteful. And you saved my life tonight, which complicates things." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "So I'm going to ask you one more time, and this time, I want the truth." His eyes dropped to her collar. "Show me the ring." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her chest, pressing against the hidden shape beneath her uniform. "I don't know what your eye saw it in the cellar. I saw it again when you were on top of me after the shooting. Don't insult my intelligence." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Elena looked into his eyes, those cold, gray, merciless eyes, and saw her own death reflected in them. There was no escape, no more lies, no more running, 15 years of hiding, and it all came down to this moment. Slowly, with trembling fingers, She reached up to her collar. She found the thin silver chain and pulled it free, lifting it over her head. The ring dangled in the air between them, spinning slowly, catching the firelight. A lion, holding a rose, the crest of the Valentino family. Dominic's face went white, his breath stopped. And in that moment, Elena saw something she had never expected to see in the eyes of her enemy: fear. The ring spun slowly between them, catching the light of the dying fire. Dominic stared at it as if it were a ghost, which, in a way, it was. His face had drained of all color, leaving his skin the pale gray of ash. "That crest," he whispered. "That's the Valentino family seal." Elena's voice was steady now, steadier than it had been all night. The secret was out. There was nothing left to hide. A lion holding a rose, the symbol of my father's house. Dominic's eyes snapped to her face. "Your father, Don Ricardo Valentino." The name hung in the air like a curse. Dominic shot to his feet, stumbling backward as if she had struck him. His hip collided with the edge of a table, sending a crystal vase crashing to the floor. He didn't seem to notice. "That's impossible." His voice was hoarse. "The Valentinos are dead. All of them. Every last one. Not all of them." Elena rose slowly from the window seat, the ring clutched in her palm. Her heart was pounding, but her tears had dried. She had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, even if she hadn't known it. "My name is Elena Valentino, daughter of Ricardo and Isabella Valentino, sister of Marco, Antonio, and little Gabriel." Each name fell from her lips like a stone dropped into still water. "The family you slaughtered 15 years ago." Dominic's face contorted. Something dark and terrible moved behind his eyes, not anger, not denial, but something worse. Memory. 15 years ago, the Valentino compound burned like a funeral pyre against the night sky. Dominic was 22 years old, his blood singing with adrenaline and the desperate need to prove himself. His father had given him this mission, his first command, his chance to show he was worthy of the Caruso name. "Leave no one alive," Don Vittorio had ordered. "The Valentinos have been a thorn in our side for too long. Tonight, we pull it out, root and stem." Dominic had led the assault himself. 12 men, armed with automatic weapons and gasoline. They had breached the walls at midnight, overwhelming the guards before they could raise an alarm. The first man he killed was young, barely older than Dominic himself. He had emerged from the front door with a shotgun, trying to buy time for his family to escape. Dominic had put 3 bullets in his chest before he could pull the trigger. He still remembered the way the man had looked at him as he fell, not with fear or hatred, but with something that looked almost like pity. Later, he would learn that man was Marco Valentino, the eldest son, the heir. The screaming had lasted for hours. Women, children, servants. Dominic's men had been thorough, just as his father demanded. At one point, Dominic had paused in a hallway, listening. A sound had reached him through the chaos, faint, muffled, coming from somewhere below. A child crying. He had searched for the source, but flames were spreading fast, and his men were calling for retreat. In the end, he had left without finding it. "Did we get everyone?" his father had asked when they returned. "Everyone," Dominic had replied. He had been wrong. The memory released him like a drowning man breaking the surface of dark water. Dominic stared at Elena, really stared at her, and for the first time, he saw it. The shape of her jaw, the color of her eyes, the proud way she held her head, even in captivity. Ricardo Valentino's daughter. She had been there that night, hidden somewhere in the burning house, listening to her family die. "You were supposed to die that night," he breathed. "I know." Elena's voice cracked, and the first tear spilled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I was in the wine cellar. My mother hid me in an empty barrel before they found her." She took a shuddering breath. "I heard everything, every scream, every gunshot, every plea for mercy that was never granted." Her amber eyes burned into his. "I heard my mother being tortured in the room above me. I heard her screaming my name, telling them she didn't know where I was. Over and over and over." Her voice broke completely. "Elena Valentino died that night. I crawled out of the ashes the next morning and buried myself so deep that even I forgot who I was. Until tonight." Dominic's hands were trembling. He clenched them into fists, trying to steady himself. "The man who tortured your mother," he said slowly, his voice tight. "Do you know who he was?" Elena shook her head. "I never saw his face, but I heard his voice. I will never forget his voice." "What did he say?" Elena's jaw tightened. The memory was acid, burning through 15 years of carefully constructed walls. "He called her Putana Valentino, The Sicilian words dripped with poison. Valentino whore. He said it over and over while she screamed. Dominic's blood turned to ice. He knew that phrase. He knew that voice. He had heard it tonight, in the restaurant, shouting orders during the chaos of the assassination attempt. He had heard it 1,000 times over 30 years of loyal service. Vinnie Bones, his most trusted capo, his father's right hand, the man who had just killed the assassin before he could be captured and questioned. Dominic's fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. Oh God, what have we done? Dominic sank into the nearest chair as if his legs could no longer support him. He looked broken. The powerful Mafia boss who had commanded armies and ordered executions sat slumped like a man who had just received a terminal diagnosis. His hands hung limp between his knees, his gray eyes staring at nothing. Tell me, he said quietly. Everything. How did you survive? What happened to you after that night? Elena remained standing by the window, the ring still clutched in her palm. Part of her wanted to refuse to guard the horrors of her past like the wounds they were. But another part, a part she had buried for 15 years, desperately wanted someone to know, to understand, to witness what she had survived. She took a shuddering breath. I stayed in the barrel until dawn. I could smell the smoke, feel the heat through the wood, but I didn't move. I didn't make a sound, just like Mama told me. Her voice was hollow, detached as if she were describing something that had happened to someone else. When I finally crawled out, the house was gone. Just ashes and bones. I found my father near the front door. He had been shot so many times I could barely recognize him. My brother Marco was beside him. Antonio was on the stairs. She paused, swallowing hard. I never found Gabriel. He was only 5 years old. I looked everywhere, but there was nothing left. Nothing. Dominic's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I walked for 2 days. No food, no water, no plan. Just walked. A truck driver picked me up outside of Newark. Elena's voice turned bitter. I thought he was being kind. She laughed, a hollow, broken sound. 3 months later, I was sold to a trafficking ring in Atlantic City. For 6 months, I was passed around, sold to whoever could pay. Her hands trembled at her sides. I was 13 years old. Dominic's fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. A muscle jumped in his jaw. I escaped during a police raid, ran into the night and didn't stop until I collapsed. The state put me in a group home in Newark. Elena's lip curled with disgust. The staff there, they weren't much better than the traffickers. Different kind of abuse. Same result. She turned to face the window, unable to look at him while she spoke the next part. I ran away when I was 16, lived on the streets for 2 years, slept in shelters, under bridges, in abandoned buildings, did things I'm not proud of to survive. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass gaunt, hollow-eyed, haunted. Eventually, I found someone who could make fake documents. I became Elena Santos, got my GED, started working, 3 jobs at a time, sometimes 4. Whatever it took to pay rent on a room the size of a closet, with no heat and cockroaches in the walls. She turned back to face him. That's my life, Don Caruso. 15 years of running, 15 years of hiding, 15 years of being no one, having nothing, trusting no one. Dominic stared at her. His face was expressionless, but his hands told a different story. They were shaking. Why didn't you go to the allied families? His voice was rough. The Morettis, the De Lucas. They would have protected a Valentino daughter. They would have helped you take revenge. Elena held his gaze. And then what? More blood? More death? More children hiding in barrels while their mothers scream? She shook her head slowly. I watched hatred destroy my entire family in one night. It took everyone I loved. My father, my mother, my brothers, my childhood, my innocence. She stepped toward him, her amber eyes burning with something that wasn't quite anger, wasn't quite sorrow, something deeper and more powerful than both. Hatred already took everything from me, Don Caruso. My whole life. It's been taking and taking and taking. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I have nothing left to give it. The fire crackled in the silence. Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see an enemy, or a threat, or a puzzle to be solved. He saw a survivor, and the weight of what his family had created pressed down on his shoulders like a mountain of bones. Dominic rose from the chair and walked to the window. He stood with his back to her, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the moonlit glass. His reflection stared back at him, a ghost of the man he thought he was, shattered by the truth of what he had done. I was the one who shot your brother. The words fell from his lips like stones. Marco, the one at the front door. I put 3 bullets in his chest. His voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of a man reciting his own sins. He was trying to protect your family. And I killed him. Elena's heart clenched, but she didn't look away. I know. Dominic turned his head slightly. What? I saw you. Her voice was barely a whisper. Through a crack in the cellar door. I saw your face when you shot him. I saw you step over his body and walk into the house. The silence that followed was absolute. Dominic turned back to the window. His hands hung at his sides, fists clenched so tight the veins stood out beneath his skin. Then why? The question was barely audible. Why what? He spun around to face her, and for the first time, Elena saw something crack in his carefully controlled mask. His gray eyes were wild, desperate, searching. Why did you save me? His voice rose. I killed your brother. I led the attack that destroyed your family. I am the reason you spent 15 years in hell. So why did you save my life? Elena stood slowly. She walked toward him, her footsteps silent on the thick carpet. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the torment in his eyes, the guilt that was eating him alive. Because when I saw that man's gun pointed at your head, she said quietly, I didn't think about revenge. I didn't think about justice. I didn't think about what you did 15 years ago. She took another step closer. I thought about who I wanted to be, what kind of person I wanted to become. Her amber eyes held his gaze, and I realized I didn't want to be like them. Like the men who killed my family, cold, ruthless, capable of watching someone die and feeling nothing. Her voice softened. My father taught me many things before he died. How to fight, how to survive, how to speak the old language. But the most important thing he ever taught me was this. Honor matters more than hate. She was close enough now to touch him, close enough to see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way his breath caught in his throat. So I saved you. Not because you deserved it, but because I refused to let hatred make me into a monster. Dominic stared at her. The firelight danced across her face, illuminating the tears that still glistened on her cheeks, the fierce pride in her amber eyes. She stood before him, the last daughter of his enemy, the survivor of his greatest sin, and there was no hatred in her gaze, only a strength he had never encountered before. You're insane, he whispered. Elena almost smiled. Probably. Or, he paused, something shifting in his expression. The suspicion faded, the coldness melted. What remained was something raw and uncertain, something that looked almost like wonder. Or you're the only sane person left in this entire godforsaken city. For a long moment, they simply stood there. 2 enemies separated by blood and history, connected by something neither of them could name. Then Dominic did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He looked at someone with respect. The door burst open. Sally stormed into the room, his face pale as chalk, his eyes wild with barely contained panic. Behind him, 2 armed guards flanked the entrance, their hands resting on their weapons. Boss, Sally's voice was tight. We have a problem, a big one. Dominic's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The vulnerable man who had stood before Elena moments ago vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating dawn of the Caruso Empire. What is it? You need to see this. Now. Dominic glanced at Elena, a brief, unreadable look, then strode toward the door. He paused at the threshold, turning back to her. Stay here. It wasn't a request, but this time, his voice held something other than command, something almost like concern. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Elena stood alone in the golden room, her heart pounding. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to make Sally, a man who had probably seen horrors she couldn't imagine, look terrified. In the study, chaos reigned. Dominic pushed through the doors to find Marco already there, his injured arm still in a sling, his face grim. The tech team was hunched over their monitors, fingers flying across keyboards, data streaming across multiple screens. Talk to me, Dominic commanded. The lead technician pulled up a series of phone records on the main screen. Red lines connected timestamps, numbers, locations, a web of communication that told a damning story. We traced the signal from the dead assassin's phone, the tech explained, his voice shaking slightly. The last call he received before the attack came from inside our network. Dominic's blood ran cold. Inside? A verified family number. Encrypted, but we cracked it. The technician swallowed hard. The number belongs to Vinnie Bones. The name hit the room like a bomb. Vinnie? Dominic's voice was deathly quiet. Vinnie has been with this family for 30 years. He served my father before me, which is exactly why no one suspected him. Marco stepped forward, his face dark with fury. We dug deeper. Found encrypted communications going back 6 months, all to the same recipient. He tapped the screen, pulling up a name that made Dominic's stomach turn. Anthony Morano, the head of the Morano family, their oldest rival, the man who had been trying to destroy the Caruso empire for decades. Morano has been planning this for months, Marco continued. The assassination wasn't just a hit, it was a coup. Kill you, throw the family into chaos, and let Morano sweep up the pieces. Vinny was his inside man. Dominic's hands curled into fists. 30 years of trust, of loyalty, of treating Vinny like family, and all of it was a lie. There's more, Sally said quietly. Dominic looked at him. What? Sally's jaw tightened. Vinny manages our offshore accounts. The emergency funds, $400 million in untraceable assets. A terrible understanding dawned in Dominic's eyes. This morning, before any of this happened, Vinny changed the access codes. He locked everyone out, even you. Sally's voice dropped. He's trying to drain us. Boss, take the money and run. The room fell silent. $400 million. Enough to cripple the Caruso empire. Enough to leave them vulnerable to every enemy they had ever made. Dominic's vision went red. He's stealing from us. His voice was barely human. A growl, a snarl, the sound of a predator about to strike. That rat bastard is trying to rob us blind while we're bleeding. He turned to Sally, his gray eyes burning with cold fury. Where is he? Sally shook his head. Gone. Left the compound 2 hours ago. Said he was checking perimeter security. His car was last spotted heading toward Morano territory. Dominic slammed his fist into the wall, cracking the plaster. Find him, he commanded, his voice like ice. I want every man we have on the streets. I want his face on every camera in this city. And I want him brought to me alive. He turned back to the screen, staring at Vinny's photograph, the face of a man he had trusted with his life. Because when I get my hands on him, he's going to beg for death. The bad news came in waves, each one worse than the last. Vinny's car was spotted crossing into Morano territory 20 minutes ago. Sally was on the phone, barking orders, his face growing darker with every report. Our men tried to intercept, but Morano's soldiers were waiting. It was a planned extraction. Dominic stood at the center of the study, surrounded by screens flashing red warnings. His empire was crumbling around him, and the man responsible was already beyond his reach. The offshore accounts, Marco said, pulling up a new display. $400 million. Everything we've built over 3 generations, and Vinny has the only access codes. The technician typed furiously, sweat beading on his forehead. I've tried to crack the encryption, but Vinny installed a failsafe. 3 wrong attempts, and the entire system wipes itself. All the money gets transferred to a dead account gone forever. How many attempts have we used? Dominic asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The technician hesitated. 2. We tried Caruso and Vittorio. Both failed. The young man's hands were shaking. 1 more wrong guess and we lose everything. Sally slammed his phone down. If that money disappears, we're finished. We won't be able to pay our soldiers, our contacts, our protection. The other families will smell blood in the water. They'll tear us apart, Marco agreed grimly. The Moranos, the De Lucas, even the small crews, everyone we've ever crossed will come for their pound of flesh. Dominic stared at the screen, at the blinking cursor waiting for a password that no one knew. 48 hours. That's how long they had before the automated transfers began. 48 hours before, Vinny drained them dry and left them to the wolves. There has to be something, he muttered. Some clue, some pattern. There is. Marco zoomed in on the password prompt. It's a riddle. In Sicilian. Ancient text filled the screen, not modern Italian, but the old dialect, the language of their ancestors, the language that had been dying for half a century. Chi cammina sutta l'umbra di Luliuni, trova l'oru. Chi cerca l'usuli, trova la morti. What does it mean? Sally demanded. Marco shook his head. Something about a lion and shadows, gold and death. I can barely read it. My grandfather spoke this dialect, but he died when I was a boy. Vinny knew, Dominic realized, his voice bitter. He knew none of us could read the old language anymore. He mocked us with our own heritage. The room fell into hopeless silence. They had 1 chance left, 1 guess, and no one could even understand the question. Dominic closed his eyes, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on him. His father's empire, his grandfather's legacy, all of it, about to slip through his fingers because of a language he had never bothered to learn. Let me see it. The voice came from the doorway. Every head in the room turned. Elena stood at the threshold, flanked by 2 guards who looked uncertain whether to stop her or let her pass. Her amber eyes were fixed on the screen, on the ancient words glowing in the darkness. "What did you say?" Dominic asked. Elena stepped into the room, her gaze never leaving the riddle. "I said, let me see it." Her voice was calm, steady. "I can read the old dialect." The room went still. "You expect us to trust a Valentino with our family's fortune?" Marco's voice dripped with suspicion. Elena finally looked away from the screen, meeting Dominic's eyes. "You don't have a choice." Every eye in the room turned to Elena. She stood in the doorway like an apparition, the ghost of a family they had destroyed, now offering to save them from ruin. The irony was almost poetic. Marco was the first to react. "Absolutely not." He stepped forward, positioning himself between Elena and the screens. "She's a Valentino. Her father was our enemy. Her brothers died trying to kill us. And you want to give her access to $400 million? Marco Dominic began. "This could be a trap." Marco's voice rose. "She could enter a wrong code on purpose, destroy everything we have and call it revenge. It's exactly what I would do in her position." The room buzzed with tension. Sally's hand drifted toward his weapon. The technicians exchanged nervous glances. Dominic raised his hand. Silence fell instantly. "Let her see it." Marco's face contorted with disbelief. "Dominic," I said, "let her see it." Dominic's voice was steel wrapped in ice. "That's an order." For a long moment, uncle and nephew stared at each other, a battle of wills that crackled through the air like electricity. Finally, Marco stepped aside, his jaw tight with suppressed fury. Elena walked forward, her footsteps silent on the thick carpet. The guards parted for her. The technicians rolled their chairs back, giving her access to the main screen. The riddle glowed in the darkness, ancient words in an ancient tongue. "Chi cammina sutta l'umbra di luliuni, trova l'oru. Chi cerca l'usuli, trova la morte." Elena read it slowly, her lips moving silently as she absorbed each word. Her heart began to pound. She knew this riddle. "We tried the obvious answers," Sally said, watching her with suspicious eyes. "Gold, lion, shadow, Sunday death. Nothing worked." Elena barely heard him. She was 10 years old again, sitting on her father's knee in his study, the fireplace crackling, the smell of his pipe tobacco, his deep voice reciting the old riddles, the secret codes that the Sicilian families had used for generations. "Remember these words, little one," her father had said. "They are the keys to doors that most people don't even know exist." "What do they mean, Papa?" "They mean that true safety is never found in the obvious places. The sun is bright, but it blinds. The shadow is dark, but it protects." Vinny had chosen this riddle deliberately. A message, a mockery. He was saying, "You Carusos have forgotten where you came from. You've forgotten the old ways, the old language, the old wisdom, and that ignorance will destroy you." He never imagined that a Valentino would be standing in this room. Elena turned to face Dominic. "I know the answer." The room held its breath. "You're certain?" Dominic asked quietly. Elena hesitated. The weight of the moment pressed down on her $400 million. The fate of an empire. The lives of everyone in this room. One wrong keystroke, and it would all be gone. "The riddle isn't asking for a literal answer," she said slowly. "It's asking for a concept, a philosophy. The old families used these codes to test whether someone truly understood their heritage or was just pretending." She looked back at the screen. "If I'm wrong, we lose everything." Dominic stepped closer to her, his gray eyes searching her face. "And if you're right?" Elena met his gaze. "Then I save the family that destroyed mine." The silence stretched like a held breath. "Do it," Dominic said. Elena sat down at the keyboard. The screen glowed before her, the cursor blinking patiently in the password field. One chance, one guess. $400 million and the fate of an empire hanging on a single word. Her fingers hovered over the keys. "Are you certain?" Dominic asked. He stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "The riddle isn't asking about gold or lions," Elena said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. "Everyone makes that mistake. They look for the obvious, the treasure, the predator, the danger." She turned to face him. "But the answer is in the shadow. In Sicilian culture, the shadow of the lion represents the safest place in the world, the space directly beneath the king's protection. It's where you stand when you have nothing to fear." Marco scoffed. "That's just philosophy. We need a password." "No," Elena shook her head. "That's exactly what Vinny wanted you to think. He knew you would try literal answers. Gold, lion, shadow. But the old codes were never about things. They were about ideas." She turned back to the screen. The answer isn't a word. It's a phrase, a declaration of loyalty. The room fell silent. Elena placed her fingers on the keys. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. If she was wrong, if her memory had failed her, if her father's teachings had faded after 15 years, everything would be lost. But her father's voice echoed in her mind, clear as the day he had first spoken these words. When someone asks you this riddle, little one, you don't answer with treasure or beasts. You answer with trust. You say, I stand in the shadow of the lion. Elena typed, L'ombre del león. Her finger hovered over the enter key. 1 second. She pressed it. 2 seconds. The screen flickered. 3 seconds. Red warning lights flashed and then vanished. The screen turned green. ACCESS. Granted. The room exploded with relief. Sally slumped against the wall, running a hand over his face. The technicians cheered, hugging each other. Even Marco let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like hours. But Elena didn't stop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating the banking interface with practiced efficiency. She had never used this system before, but the logic was universal. Freeze accounts, revoke access, block transfers. What are you doing? Sally demanded, locking Vinny out. Elena's eyes never left the screen, freezing all pending transactions, blocking any new transfer requests. Numbers scrolled past millions of dollars that had been seconds away from disappearing forever. Elena captured them all, pulling them back from the brink, securing them behind new encryption protocols. Done. She pushed back from the keyboard. $400 million. Safe. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't tension or fear or suspicion. It was awe. Dominic stared at her, this woman who had every reason to destroy his family, who could have typed a wrong answer and watched his empire crumble as justice for what he had done to hers. Instead, she had saved them. Valentino knowledge just rescued the Caruso family, he said quietly. Elena stood, turning to face him. The firelight caught her amber eyes, making them glow like molten gold. Ironic, isn't it? A strange expression crossed Dominic's face, something between wonder and pain. Your father would be proud, he said. Wherever he is, I imagine he's laughing right now. Elena's throat tightened. He always did have a dark sense of humor. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two enemies bound together by blood and history and something neither of them could name. Then Marco's voice cut through the silence. This doesn't change anything. She's still a Valentino. The spell broke. But something had shifted in the room. Something that could never be undone. Elena had been escorted back to her gilded cage. She sat by the window, watching the first pale streaks of dawn paint the horizon, wondering if she would live to see the sun fully rise. She had saved them their money, their empire, their pride, but she was still a Valentino. And in this world, blood debts were paid in blood. 3 floors below, in Dominic's private study, a different kind of battle was being waged. She has to die. Marco's voice was hard as granite. He stood before the fireplace, his injured arm still in its sling, his face carved with the ruthless pragmatism that had kept the Caruso family alive for 3 generations. It's not personal, he continued. It's law. She's a Valentino, the last Valentino. As long as she breathes, she's a threat to everything we've built. Sally nodded from his position by the door. She knows too much now. Our finances, our security systems, our faces. If we let her go, she becomes a liability. If the Moranos find out who she is, what she knows, they'll use her against us. Dominic sat behind his desk, silent. His gray eyes were fixed on a point somewhere in the middle distance, his expression unreadable. Marco pressed harder. Your father destroyed the Valentino family for a reason, Dominic. They were rising too fast, making alliances that threatened our territory. Don Vittorio did what needed to be done. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. If you let her live, you spit on his legacy. You tell the world that the Carusos have gone soft. The fire crackled in the silence. Dominic rose slowly from his chair. He walked to the window, his back to the 2 men who had counseled his family for decades. Outside, the dawn was breaking over Long Island, turning the sky from black to purple to gold. My father, he said quietly, killed an entire family. Men, women, children. He turned to face them. He burned a 13-year-old girl's world to ashes and left her to be sold to traffickers. He ordered the torture of a mother while her daughter listened from a wine cellar. His voice hardened. Is that the legacy you want me to protect? Is that the honor of the Caruso name? Marco's jaw tightened. It was war, Dominic. There are no innocents in war. She was a child. She's not a child anymore. She's a threat. Dominic's eyes turned to steel. She saved my life." His voice was low but carried the weight of absolute authority. "When she could have let me die, when she had every reason to let that bullet find its mark, she threw herself in front of it instead." He stepped toward Marco, his presence suddenly filling the room like a storm. "She saved our money. $400 million. Gone in an instant if not for her. The Valentino knowledge that we destroyed, that we burned along with their books and their homes and their children, that knowledge just rescued us from ruin." His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "According to the old laws, the laws our grandfathers lived by, I owe her a life debt, and I will not dishonor that debt by putting a bullet in her head." Marco opened his mouth to protest, but Dominic cut him off. "Elena Valentino lives." The words hung in the air like a decree from God. "She is under my protection, my personal protection." Dominic's gray eyes swept from Marco to Sally, cold and absolute. "Anyone who touches her, anyone who threatens her, harms her, or so much as looks at her wrong dies. I don't care if it's a soldier, a capo, or someone in this room." He held Marco's gaze. "Am I clear?" The silence stretched for an eternity. Finally, Marco nodded a single, stiff movement. "You're the Dawn," he said quietly. "It's your decision." Sally echoed the sentiment, though his eyes betrayed his doubts. Dominic turned back to the window. "Find Vinny," he ordered. "That's our priority now. The Valentino girl is no longer your concern." Marco and Sally exchanged a long, loaded glance as they moved toward the door. In that single look past a conversation that needed no words, Dominic Caruso had just shattered 50 years of blood feud with a single sentence. The question was whether it would save them or destroy them all. The fire had burned low by the time Dominic returned. Elena sat curled in an armchair before the dying embers, her knees drawn to her chest, her father's ring clutched in her palm. She hadn't moved in hours, hadn't slept, hadn't eaten the food that had been brought to her. She was waiting for the door to open one final time, waiting for the men with guns, waiting for the bullet that would end 15 years of running. When the lock clicked, she didn't flinch. Dominic entered alone. No guards, no witnesses. He closed the door quietly behind him, and for a moment, he simply stood there, watching her in the firelight. He looked exhausted. The weight of the night, the assassination, the betrayal, the revelations had carved new lines into his face. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his gray eyes shadowed with something that might have been guilt or grief. He crossed the room slowly, lowering himself into the armchair beside hers. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across the walls. "I've made my decision." Elena's fingers tightened around the ring, but she didn't look at him. "You're going to live." The words hung in the air. Elena remained motionless. She had heard too many promises in her life from social workers, from foster parents, from men who claimed they wanted to help. She had learned that words meant nothing. "Did you hear me?" Dominic leaned forward. "Elena, you're safe." "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Not because you saved me." Dominic's voice was quiet, heavy with something she couldn't name. "Not because you saved our money. Those are debts, and debts can be repaid in other ways." He paused, staring into the flames. "I'm letting you live because I'm tired." The admission seemed to cost him something. Tired of killing, tired of blood feuds and vengeance and watching the bodies pile up. "I've been doing this for 15 years, ever since that night at your family's compound, and I've never questioned it, never asked if there was another way." He turned to look at her. "Until you." Elena finally met his gaze. Her amber eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I can't change what I did," Dominic continued. "I can't bring back your father or your brothers. I can't erase the 15 years of hell you've survived. That guilt will follow me to my grave." He reached out, his hand hovering in the air between them. "But I can give you a future, a real one, if you'll accept it." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek. "Why would you do that?" Her voice cracked. "I'm your enemy, the daughter of your enemy, everything your family stands against." Dominic's hand found her face, his thumb brushing away the tear with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man with so much blood on his hands. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said softly. "You survived things that would have destroyed anyone else. You had every chance to let me die tonight, every reason, every right, and you chose mercy instead." His gray eyes searched hers. "In this world of killers and thieves, you're the only real thing I've found." Elena's breath caught in her throat. Dominic leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. She could feel the warmth of his breath, smell the faint traces of whiskey and smoke, see the silver flecks in his eyes. "Stay with me, Elena." His lips hovered inches from hers, not as a prisoner, not as a hostage, not as a debt to be repaid. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her dark hair. Stay as part of my world, part of my life. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. Part of me. The fire crackled. The night held its breath. And Elena, for the first time in 15 years, stopped running. 1 week later, Elena woke to sunlight. It streamed through silk curtains instead of cracked blinds. It warmed Egyptian cotton sheets instead of a threadbare mattress on a concrete floor. It illuminated a room that was hers, truly hers, with fresh flowers on the nightstand, and a closet full of clothes that actually fit. She lay still for a moment, waiting for the dream to shatter. It didn't. The past 7 days had passed in a blur of small miracles. The gilded cage had become a sanctuary. The guards who had watched her with suspicion now nodded respectfully when she passed. The servants who had whispered the Valentino girl behind her back now called her Miss Elena. She had her own room, not the sitting room where she had been imprisoned, but a proper bedroom in the east wing, just down the hall from Dominic's chambers. It had a private bathroom with a marble tub, a balcony overlooking the gardens, and a lock on the door that she controlled. For the first time in 15 years, Elena had a space that was hers. She had food, real food, 3 meals a day, prepared by a private chef who asked about her preferences and dietary restrictions as if she were a guest rather than a prisoner. She had clothes, dresses, shoes that didn't have holes in the soles, a warm coat for the crisp autumn mornings. But more than any of that, she had something she had forgotten existed: respect. Not everyone had accepted the new order. Sally still watched her with wary eyes, keeping his distance, his hand never far from his weapon. But he followed Dominic's commands, and that was enough. Marco had surprised her. After their confrontation in the study, she had expected hostility. Instead, he had offered a curt nod the following morning, not friendship, but acknowledgement, acceptance of Dominic's decision, if not approval. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. This morning, Elena found Dominic in the sunroom, seated at a small table laden with fresh fruit, pastries, and strong Italian coffee. He looked up when she entered, and something in his gray eyes softened. "Good morning, good morning." She sat across from him, still marveling at the normalcy of the moment. Breakfast, sunlight, conversation, things other people took for granted, things she had never expected to have again. Dominic slid a tablet across the table. "We've tracked Vinny to a safe house in Newark. Morano is protecting him, but their alliance is fragile. One wrong move and they'll turn on each other." Elena studied the intelligence report, her mind automatically cataloging details, connections, weaknesses. "The shipping routes," she said, pointing to a map. "My father used similar channels 20 years ago. There's a vulnerability here, at the harbor checkpoint. If you apply pressure." She trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. Dominic was watching her with an unreadable expression. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "You've already done more than enough. More than anyone could ask." Elena set down the tablet. "This isn't about debt," she said. "Not anymore." She met his gaze, her amber eyes steady. "I spent 15 years hiding, surviving, existing without actually living." She took a breath. "I'm tired of being a ghost. I want to choose something for myself. And I choose this." She gestured vaguely at the room, the table, him. "I choose to help, not because I have to, because I want to." Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached across the table and took her hand in his. His grip was warm, strong, certain. "Then we do this together," he said. "From now on." Elena's fingers intertwined with his. For the first time in 15 years, she wasn't alone. The evening air was crisp and clean. Elena stood on the balcony of the Caruso estate, watching the distant lights of Manhattan glitter like scattered diamonds against the velvet darkness. The city that had been her prison for 15 years now looked different somehow. Smaller, less terrifying. Dominic stepped up beside her, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. He offered her one, and she took it, their fingers brushing in the exchange. For a moment, they simply stood together in comfortable silence, watching the world below. "It won't stay quiet for long," Dominic said finally. "The underworld has ears everywhere. They'll know you're alive soon. Rumors spread faster than fire in this business." Elena took a sip of wine. "How will they react? Some will want you dead. The Valentino name still carries weight and enemies." He paused. "Others will try to use you, make alliances, exploit your bloodline for their own gain. And the rest?" Dominic turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "The rest will want you to lead them." The Valentino family had allies. Elena, loyal soldiers who scattered after the massacre, families who owed your father debts that were never repaid. He set his glass on the balcony railing. When they learn the last Valentino is alive, they'll come looking for their queen. Elena shook her head. I don't want to lead anyone. I just want to live. You don't have a choice. Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. It's in your blood. Whether you claim it or not, you are Elena Valentino. That name carries power. Before she could respond, Dominic's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, his eyes scanning the message. As he read, his expression darkened like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. What is it? Elena asked. Vinny. Dominic's jaw tightened. They found him. He's with Morano, just as we suspected. That's good news, isn't it? There's more. He looked up from the phone, his eyes meeting hers. Morano knows about you. He's spreading the word to every family on the East Coast. The Valentino princess is alive, and the Carusos are holding her captive. Elena's blood ran cold. That's a lie. It doesn't matter. Truth is, whatever people believe. Dominic slipped the phone back into his pocket. Some families will think I've kidnapped you for leverage. Others will assume we've formed an alliance, the two most powerful bloodlines united. And either way, war is coming. Dominic turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. The other families will have to choose sides. Old alliances will crumble. New ones will form. Blood will be spilled. The weight of his words settled over them like a shroud. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. I've brought chaos to your door. No, Dominic squeezed her hands. Chaos was already here. You just forced it into the light. He stepped closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. The question is, are you ready? This won't be easy. There will be danger, betrayal, loss. Once we start down this path, there's no turning back. Elena looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man who had destroyed her family, the man who had offered her salvation, the man who was now asking her to stand beside him against the world. 15 years ago, she had been a terrified child hiding in a barrel while her world burned. Now she was something else entirely. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was small at first, tentative, uncertain, but it grew until it reached her eyes, lighting them with a fire that had been dormant for 15 years. Her first real smile since the night of the massacre. I've spent 15 years running, she said quietly, hiding, pretending to be invisible, letting fear control every decision I made. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin. No more. I'm done being a ghost. Dominic's lips curved into a matching smile, proud, fierce, admiring. Then we faced the storm together. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as they gazed out at the glittering city. Together, Elena echoed. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain and change. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled a promise of the tempest to come. But Elena wasn't afraid anymore. The shy waitress who had trembled before a mafia boss was gone forever. In her place stood Elena Valentino, the last daughter of a fallen house, the survivor of unspeakable horrors, the woman who had chosen mercy over vengeance and found strength in forgiveness. The queen had returned, and beside her, the king of the Caruso Empire stood ready for war. Their story was only just beginning. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our daily uploads. Give this video a like and share it with friends and family who might need to hear this message today. We would love to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between hatred and forgiveness? What would you have done in Elena's place? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your stories inspire us to create more content like this. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of our growing community. Your support means everything to us. Wishing you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. May you find the strength to face your own storms and the courage to choose love over fear. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you in the next video.